Okay, we talked a lot about Iskafi and Ishafcha yesterday. The two different levels of avodah that are responsive, that are necessary to bring about the ultimate purpose of creation, which is the Eibishter wants to do b'tachtonim, but he wants us to make it through our avodah, and our avodah composes those two different aspects: Iskafia, subduing the Yetzer Hara; Ishafcha, transforming it, or subduing. The Yetzer Hara comes from the Nefesh Bahamis, right? Transforming, so I'm not so much transforming the Yetzer Hara as I'm transforming the Nefesh Bahamis, so it doesn't express a Yetzer Hara in that particular aspect, right? Change isn't 100% or nothing. Change is incremental. Ooh, that's a good word. Incremental. I should have put on my gartel. What does that mean? That means there can be certain aspects of my life that have been successfully dealt with, and other parts not yet. That's why the Rebbe says people learn Tanya, and I think there are these people called tzaddikim, and these people called beinonim, and these people called rishoyim. So on a certain level, that's true. But ultimately, the Rebbe says very, very clearly that everybody relative to certain things might be referred to as a tzaddik. Other people, that same person relative to other things might be considered a beinoni. And that same person relative to other things might be considered something else. Right? Relative to what is he a tzaddik? Well, if he doesn't have a Yetzer Hara for anything, if there's a particular reality in Torah and mitzvahs that he has no negative subconscious impulse relative to, so then relative to that he's a tzaddik. I would assume that basically everybody in this room relative to the Aveira called don't murder, you're a tzaddik. I hope you don't have subconscious desires to murder that you then overcome by saying, no, that's a bad idea and I'm not going to do that. If you do, could you please tell us, and we will all take the necessary precautions when we come to class. Like, we'll also carry a knife, right? But most of us do not have any subconscious desire to murder to such an extent that the idea of murdering doesn't pop into our conscious reality such that we have to push it out.
Only occasionally.
Only occasionally. Thank you very much. You can sit at the end of the table, right? Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that a person might not, wish someone dead. Right? When you hear about certain people in the world that are clearly evil people, I mean, you're more than happy if they were to drop dead, right? And a lot of those people, if you were to go kill them, it actually wouldn't even be murder. But okay, that being said, you're not, the guy who cuts you off on the highway, you don't open up the glove compartment, reach for the gun and say, no, it's us. Right?
In Florida, they do that.
No.
They don't say it's us, they just take it out.
They just take it out, right? Okay. Seder, got the idea? Okay. I'm sorry, I have no more copies. I ran out of copies. I made so many copies. And a matter of fact, and Hershey in the office we said, how many copies do I have to make? And I said, well, I don't know. There's a lot of people. He said, okay, Baruch Hashem. So he made copies. We still ran out of them. So if you're sitting next to someone with a copy, look on with them and then you'll be okay. Okay, so relative to certain things, you might be a tzaddik, right? Avodah Zarah, real Avodah Zarah. I don't mean, where people, cell phones are Avodah Zarah. Okay, fine, cell phones are Avodah Zarah, good. Like real Avodah Zarah, the Avodah Zarah that the Rambam talks about in Hilchos Avodah Zarah in Mishnah Torah. Shulchan Aruch talks about things you're not allowed. There's no Hilchos Avodah Zarah in Shulchan Aruch, but right. Things that you're not allowed to do, they come up spattered around here and there, right? So, thank you. Where'd this come from?
It's mine. I'll read out the book.
You have the book. Okay, so here, there's another copy out there for them, and they can take eight of the breakfast today.
The book here.
There is a book.
Yeah.
There is a book. Okay, Tafshin Yud of the Frierdiker Rebbe or Basi Legani of our Rebbe.
You want me to show you?
Oh, it's all right. It's all right.
This one? Thanks.
It's on this shelf right here.
Okay, thanks.
Avodah Zarah, you probably don't have a taiva to go bow down to some idol. Okay, fine. Relative to other things, you might be a Beinoni, that you might have a subconscious desire for this thing, but as soon as it comes into your head, you go, ugh, go away. Oh, where'd that come from? That. Okay. That's what a Beinoni does every time, right? And then there's the other one. We won't talk about him, right? Okay? So everybody is all of those together. The Rebbe said, Sadi Beis Reish spells, it's the root of the word Sibur, a community. We're all a community of different types of, different aspects of our personality, etc. Okay. So the last thing we saw was the line from Tanya. Oh, we have it's going to be hard to do because this board is so thin. And he said it would be wonderful to be able to sometimes turn this board around. Okay, so I'll write it up here. Karistale. Kariskafia. Kariskafia. Sitra Akra, the other side. To write just this way so we'll see how it works. Istalek, Yikra, Dekuchabrihu, Behuhu, Alnu. Okay, when you subdue the Sitra Akra, you use Gafi. Chaf Dalit in Aramaic is like a chaf and a shin. In Hebrew, Kisha means what? In Hebrew, when. So in Aramaic, there's actually a word, kad, which means when. Kadiskafya Sitra Akra. When you subdue the Sitra Akra, what do you do? Istalek Yikra Dekucha Brichu B'chol Amim. It goes out the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in all of the worlds. Now we mentioned yesterday, in all of the worlds is not the address where that godliness is revealed. It's the adjective defining the godliness, right? It's defining the or, right? When you subdue Sitra Achra, what happens? Meaning, that means when you tell your Yetzer Hara, no, go away, leave me alone, and just gay pfeifen. When you do that, for something serious or for something relatively innocuous, right? Whatever it happens to be, because sometimes it doesn't have to be mamish and aveira. Can simply be that, there's a side of Avera in this, but simply, right, that you're sitting and learning and you feel, you know what, maybe I'll go get a ruggle, and you say, no, I'm not going to for 5 minutes. Good job, right? It's called iskafia, right? Okay. Did anything major happen? You're going to learn the same 5 minutes. But instead of going right now, you said to your Yitzhar, you don't need a rugula right now. You're going to live, everything will be fine. You're not going to just fall in the chair, God forbid. If I don't need a rugula, so I'll sit and learn for 5 more minutes. Then I'll go get one. All right? Okay. I have a friend who once told the story in 770. It was Yud Shvat, 20 years ago, whatever. He was speaking about his father. Right, so his father came to the Rebbe with his grandfather. Okay, but we have to do father and son here. So the father came with his father, and the father at that point was about 9 or 10 years old. He was sitting in 770 with his father, and the grandson is telling the story. Right, and he told his father, "I want to go home to eat lunch." So he said, "Okay, do you know the way home?" "Yeah." "Fine, good." So he walked out of 770, he took a left turn, and as he was walking down the street, the Rebbe was walking the other way down Eastern Parkway. And the Rebbe used to walk alone. Don't ask me why. Often there's pictures of the Rebbe walking alone. And obviously the Rebbe wasn't walking alone when you see the picture because the photographer was there, but he was never intrusive, the famous photographer. So actually was, and the Rebbe led him, which was really amazing. All those amazing pictures we have of the Rebbe that are close-ups, etc. He asked the Rebbe for permission to be intrusive, and the Rebbe said yes. If it'll help the Hasidim, you can do that. So if you have a picture of the Rebbe davening, and these guys right next to the Rebbe, leave him alone, leave the Rebbe alone. The Rebbe consented to that. So the Rebbe was walking along Eastern Parkway. So this little boy didn't want to run into the Rebbe on the street. So he went off and hid behind a tree. He just stood behind a tree. So then the Rebbe will pass and he'll come out and he'll go back home. So the Rebbe came and walked around to where he was and said, "Good morning," to this little boy hiding behind the tree. So the Rebbe asked him, "Where were you?" He said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going home for lunch." So where were you? I was in 770 with my father. So the Rebbe said, will you do me a favor? You'll do the Rebbe a favor. Go back into 770, learn for 5 more minutes, then go home for lunch. Will you do me that favor? That's what he did. So he went back in. His father said, what are you doing here? Now, I wonder if his father believed him the first time he told him that I just ran into the Rebbe on the street and he told me to come in. But probably the father found out later that it was true, by asking around and asking the mosquito and saying, could you guys figure out, because my kid told me this story, I think he's, hallucinating. But evidently it really happened. Right? Okay. So that's also his coffee. He's going to eat lunch. He's not going to not eat lunch, but he's sitting for 5 more minutes and doing something holy before he goes and eats lunch. If you'll still have lunch here, if there's no lunch, if you wait 5 minutes, so make sure you go to lunch. But if there's still going to be lunch, so after mincha, sit down and say a kapitel tehillim and then go to lunch. Anything terrible happen? Now, if everybody does that, then there's going to be a big rush to lunch. But I don't know whether everybody's going to do that. I don't think you have to worry about it, right? Because, there's always those guys who don't come to mincha because they want to get to lunch first. So, you won't be ahead of them. Right? They'll be finishing up their lunch by the time you get there. Right? Okay. So, Kadiskafya Sitra Achra, what do you reveal? An infinite level of godly light that's found in all the worlds equally, and we talked about that at the end of shiur yesterday. That's called or save. It means the Rebbe said it in the Mayanot. Or save kol almin. Right. So let's keep reading from that. We're 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 lines up, 13 lines up. The last 2 words on the line are kama markad, and then there's an asterisk. It's the only asterisk on the left side. Pretty easy to find. Kariskafya sitra achu yistalak yukid dekucha brichu b'chul almin. When you subdue the sitra achu, it goes out the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is found in all the worlds equally. That's what those words mean. B'chul almin, again, is not the address where the light is revealed. It is an adjective describing the light. Okay, so in other words, b'chul almin describes that. What kind of yikra, what kind of glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what kind of light? The light that's in all the worlds. That's the pshat in the pasuk. In the statement from Tanya. Vehine, we read this yesterday, 2 lines, we'll read them again. Mashikosa b'chul almin, that which it says b'chul almin, all the worlds, hakavana, the intention is al madrega sa'or, the level of godly light. God isn't light. Light is a mashal for godly energy. Dehu b'chul almin b'shava, that is in all the worlds equally. V'hainu, what does that mean? That is, or hasevev kol almin, the light that surrounds all the worlds. Shemeir b'chol ha'ilamis b'shava, that it shines in all of the worlds equally. Okay. Now, in order to understand that, the Rebbe is now going to explain to us in the next 15, 20 lines what Orma Male is, light that fills. So let's start reading that. Dahare. Where'd I go? What happened to me? It's not a hurry. I'm looking for the hurry. It isn't there. If I keep looking for that, I won't get anywhere. The ba'elamis, in worlds, yesh, hara yesh chiluke, there's my hurry. Yesh chiluke madregas. There are different levels of godly light that power different worlds. Right? There are basically 4 worlds. Right? What are those worlds called? We're going to see on the next page. They're called Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. The world of emanation, the world of creation, the world of form, and the world of action. Okay, we'll see it on the next page. You don't have to worry about it. Those 4 worlds differ in character tremendously. The basic difference is, well, there's a tremendous difference between that first world called the world of Atzilus and the next 3. Because the world of Atzilus is a world of the Eibishter himself. It's not a created world. It's Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's him. It's the creator, not the created. Where does created come into existence? In a world called Elam Abriya, the world of creation. Metaphysical reality. Why do we care about these worlds? Well, because God created them. Why did he create them? I don't know. But they're interesting worlds because they relate to us. There's a place called Gan Eden where souls go after they leave this world. Well, there's two levels of Gan Eden. One level of Gan Eden called Upper Gan Eden. That's in that world called Elam Abriya. There's all sorts of neshamas up there right now having a good time. Right? The world below that is called Elam Yetzira. Who's there? Other neshamas in what's called Gan Eden Tachton. Your average everyday guy starts there. Right? Might he make it to Gan Eden Elyon if his progeny down here on earth are doing all sorts of wonderful things and doing lots of mitzvahs and giving lots of tzedakah and saying Kaddish and doing all those things necessary to help in the neshama experience and elevation? Yeah, 100%. That neshama could be elevated to a higher level, right, by virtue of what's happening down here.
Just to imagine, these 4 words is in Tikkun, yeah? These 4 words is in Tikkun?
No. I mean, yes and no. The only world that's really Elam Atikun is Elam Atzilus, and when, if we understand what Shviras HaKelim is and what Toyu is, so then we can appreciate what Tikkun is, okay? But the reality brought about by, you're asking based on a notion of Toyu and Tikkun, the reality brought about by Shviras HaKelim affects all 4 worlds. The Eibishter Sotis, in the Chassidus explains, the Eibishter fixed Elam Atzilus. Right? It's fixed. The rest of the worlds are still in a state of chaos. In other words, they still express yesh, separateness. Okay, so what's the difference between these worlds? Well, the Rebbe is going to explain it very, very clearly, the difference between these worlds. But they're upper worlds and lower worlds, and that means more revelation and less revelation, and that means more experience, or, well, if we're talking about more revelation, that means less experience of self, and then less revelation means more experience of self, right, for the creatures in those worlds. What else, who else, I guess? They'd probably rather be called who than what. Who else lives in those worlds? Angels. Angels live in those worlds, right? Okay, what do? Well, I don't know. They say Kadosh, 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 Havayat Tzvakos. They say that all the time. And they say Baruch V'Kvod Hashem Nim Kaimei. They say that all the time. They evidently are our prototype in terms of how to praise God. Like we look at them and we learn how to praise God from them because they're evidently very good at it, which is what they do all day. Right? Okay. And then there's this world, this physical world, which is a world of tremendous separation and a world of tremendous concealment. Okay, so now before we see, the Rebbe is going to talk. Well, you know what? Let's read. We'll read down at the bottom of the page, and then we'll bring a parable for all of this, because it's not hard to understand without the parable to the bottom of the page. Right? There's different levels in these worlds. What does that mean? The Eina Doim, it's not similar. Eilam Esel Yonim, the upper worlds. They're more metaphysical, more spiritual. Leilam is Tachtonim, to the lower worlds. What's the difference? Basic difference. The Beilam is Elyonim in the upper worlds. Meir A'ar Begilui. The light shines in a revealed way. Godly light is not concealed in those worlds. Ubeilam is Tachtonim, and in the lower worlds, Ha'ar Eina Meir Begilui Kol Kach. The light does not shine in such a revealed way. V'yesh, and there is a reality, and we're in it right now, experiencing it. Sha'or ba b'bechinas helam v'hester, that the light comes in a quality of complete concealment. Down here, you don't see the godly light energizing everything that exists. Is everything we're experiencing energized by godly light, including ourselves? Yes. Do we experience that? No. Can we develop an appreciation of that? Absolutely. Do we see it? Not like we see walls and books.
So it's like a metaphor for Hashem's presence.
Yeah, light. God's not light. Light is a creation. Light is just a parable used, a metaphor used to describe godly energy. It's an amazing metaphor. It works perfectly. That's why God created physical light. Right? We'll see how light and kalim, vessels, relate to each other, and we'll appreciate how physical light is such an incredible parable and metaphor for godliness. Right? But what one thing we know about light, right? It's constantly connected to its source. And if it loses that connection to its source, what happens to it? It ceases to exist. It's not destroyed, it just ceases to exist. Destroying something means it's gone from one state to another state. We destroyed the building, so now it's a bunch of rubble. right? There's no building. If the building were to just disappear, right, as if it was never there, okay, so that would be what would happen to the light on this page. Gone. Right? Now, not so gone because this isn't very thick, but if I had a 150 page book and I just closed it onto that page, so there's no light on that page anymore. There's no residue of light on the page. Right? Is it as if there once was light? Oh, why would you say such a thing? Who says it's as if there was once light? Is there the potential of light happening there again? Yeah, absolutely. But light is powerfully connected to its source, so it's a very beautiful parable for godly energy, which is what maintains the existence. It's the source of the existence and maintains the existence of every different level of reality because it's connected to the source of all reality. It's the revelation of that source, right? Only a revelation of it. It's only a ha'ara. It's only an illumination from that place. Right? But it's so powerfully connected to that place that you can basically, even though it's not true, but it's not unreasonable, to connect the light to its source in such the way that you'll see them as one. So you might say, and I don't think anybody would put you in a padded room if you said this, even though if you think about it seriously, it's one of the stupidest things you could possibly ever say. You might say, boy, the sun's hot today. The sun is hot today? The sun's hot every day, right? Even in Minnesota in December, the sun's hot. What isn't hot in Minnesota in December?
The revelation.
Sunlight, right? Sunlight is not particularly hot in Minnesota in December. Now, interestingly enough, same day, same sun, get on a plane, go to Miami, won't take you long, and the sun will be hot. No, the sunlight will be hot. Why? I don't know. It's just angles. Somehow, a 3-hour airplane ride makes a difference in the heat of the sun that's coming from 93 million miles away. That angle makes enough of a difference that in Miami, you'll buy a hotel room, and in Minnesota, you'll buy a plane ticket. Right? I don't know. Okay, Beseda angle. Fine. Okay, it's 93 million miles away. If we were 92 million miles away, we would fry up we would sizzle up and disappear in about a macrosecond. And if we were 94 million miles away, we would turn into an icicle immediately and cease to exist. We just happen to be 93 million miles away, which works just perfectly. Unless you live in the Antarctic without a jacket, so then it doesn't work so well there. But okay. That's how light works, which is really amazing, and so that's why we use it as a mashal for Elokus, because it's the vehicle that allows, so to speak, for Elokus to travel everywhere. But I mean, it's the revelation of the Eibishter. But it's called a ha'ara, an illumination, not the Eibishter himself. It's a ha'ara of him. Okay, now, but everything's him anyway, okay? So we always have to deal with that dichotomy. But it's not the essence of God. In Chassidus, we talk a lot about the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not light. It's not even a luminary. It's just absolute essential being. Absolute isness. What does it look like? Where did it come from? What's its purpose? No answers to any of those questions. Just is. When did it start? It didn't. It just is. God. About that level, the only part of you that can touch that level is your emunah. Your intellect can't. Your emunah can't. That's why emunah is a more powerful power of the soul than intellect. Okay, but back to the words here. Or. So there'll be a greater or lesser revelation of the godly energy vitalizing this place, whichever place you happen to be in. So if you're in Eilam Abriya, godliness is revealed to you. And you don't have intellectual discussions about the existence of God, right? You might have, in this world, intellectual discussions about the nature of the existence of the table. But there's no philosophical question as to whether the table is. It is. You don't think so? Let's drop it on your head and see what happens. Right? There's a table here. What's the real, deep, essential existence of that table? Okay, that's a real question, but don't. There's no questions in this world about the presence of physical reality. What is physical reality? Interesting question. But is it here? Yeah, well, yes, it is. No, I don't think it is. Well, why did you eat breakfast this morning? Deep philosopher sitting there saying Om. Maybe he didn't eat breakfast this morning. Okay, if he doesn't eat breakfast for 50 days, he's going to be dead. Right? With all his philosophical greatness. Physicality's here. It's not a philosophical question. What it is, why it is, how it is. Oh, those are real questions. Right? So too in Elam Abriya, God isn't a philosophical question. What exactly am I experiencing? How does it work? Okay, that's real, but is it there? Well, it's there. There it is. Look, it's as obvious as physical reality here. Wow, amazing place. And what do they do up there? Well, Chazal tell us they derive benefit from the radiance of the divine presence. And evidently that's so pleasant that it's basically impossible to describe. One moment of that pleasure is greater than all the pleasure that could possibly be experienced in all of the history of the world, emotional, physical, spiritual, intellectual pleasure, everything that's ever happened in the history of the world, one moment of the pleasure in Elam Haba is greater than all of that. It's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that you've all read in the summertime. 4th chapter, right? Wow. Sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good. That's Elam Abriya, or Elam Yetzirah. So there's a world where the light expresses itself in complete hiddenness. V'yesh b'zeh chilukim madregas. There's different levels, higher, lower. U'kemesha kosev af yodi yosda aretz. My hand formed aretz. V'yamini, and my right, or really better word for yosda, founded. Yesod is a foundation, right? Because really tafka we're going to use as formed. V'yamini tafka shamayim, and my right hand formed shamayim. Okay, when we say Shemaim here, we're going to see that Shemaim doesn't mean that which you look up and see at night. Shemaim means metaphysical levels of reality. V'isa b'medrash, the Medrash says, Nota Yamina, he stretched out his right hand, so to speak. Ubara Shemaim, and created Shemaim. V'nota Smeila, he stretched out his left hand, so to speak. Ubara Aretz, and now what does that mean? Oh, V'yadua, it's well known, and probably everybody in here has heard this idea. The Yad Yamin, this right side, what does right generally relate to? Mara Allah or Vagilu Yosef. Right is chesed, revelation, more light. That's the right side. So that's Shemayim, a place of tremendous godly revelation. V'zeu v'yaminu tafcha Shemayim. That's what it means, that his right hand formed Shemayim. The Shemayim, what does it mean? Shemayim, a kavan el yonim, the higher worlds. We're not talking about the stars and the planets. They're physical. Shama gilui, there, the revelation, bebechinas yamin. It's in the quality of yamin. What does that mean? Shu gilui ha'or. The light is revealed. And now the Rebbe says something very interesting. Va'or atzmei, and the light itself, hu bebechinas gilui, is in the quality of gilui. In other words, there's quantitatively and qualitatively more light. There's more light revealed, and the quality of that light is a higher quality. It's undergone less what? What's that magic word that everybody knows? Tzimtzum, right? Less tzimtzum, right? How does tzimtzum work? Pretty simple. If there's too much light, right? So then the light will not allow for the existence of anything other than itself. Right? Okay, so now to put that in slightly different terms. The natural state of light, the natural reality of light. What is light? Infinite reality. Light is infinite. Okay, so then therefore, it's not itself. What can it know? What can it not relate to in any way, shape, or form? And how? Where could it not be revealed, so to speak? Where can't you reveal infinite reality? In finite reality. Right? Finite reality opposes the existence of infinite reality, and vice versa. Right? Finite reality conceals infinite reality. Right? So if the finitude of a reality will be very, very, very powerful, what will it conceal completely? Infinite reality. We'll call that or. Right? Light. Okay. But if you're were there to be a revelation in this room right now of absolute infinite godly light, what would happen?
Frazzle up.
All finite reality would become completely and totally bottle and cease to exist. Right? There wouldn't be any finite, but where is it? It's hiding in there, the finite reality? What would happen to it? It's gone. Why? Because now you're experiencing infinite reality, not finite reality. You and I know of the two, but so to speak, never the twain shall meet, by definition. Okay, and now I'm going to say a line which you've all heard, not all, some of you, right? Most of you, but it's a very, very important line to hear because people get very confused by this, right? God is not infinite. Godly light is infinite. God is beyond infinite. Infinite's limited. We just talked about the limitation of infinite. How is infinite limited? What can't infinite do? Be finite. Express itself in finite. Right? What can God do? Express himself in finite. Okay. This isn't God. Don't bow down to it. But it only exists by virtue of the fact that he does. And right, were he to somehow extract his godly energy from this thing, it would just disappear. And my watch would fall. Everything else would fall. Soon the only thing I would catch is my watch. Yeah? Okay. So there's infinite and finite. So God's not infinite, God's not finite. He's beyond both. He's the source of both. He's the source of infinite reality. You and I call that or, light. He's also the source of finite reality, which the Rebbe has not mentioned yet. Right? Hasn't mentioned, he's just said there's these places that hide God, but he hasn't explained how that works. But what is it that's responsible for the revelation of finitude? Small little word. And you have to know this. It's called kli, vessel, kli. What does a kli allow for? A kli allows for infinite to express itself in finite. Or even, to say it even more like wild, infinite to express itself as finite. Not just in. Look at that. What an amazing thing, Amnon. You brought it today. Amnon's book has been a muscle for this a lot. Oh my gosh, I forgot about the back of the book. Look at the back of this book, guys. Is this not the coolest thing you ever seen? This is just the coolest thing. Okay, but this is the part we like. Physical light. This is why we call God light. This light out here. Basically, I mean, I understand there's walls holding it in, right? But this light out here has a certain infinite nature, right? Because it would just keep going if there weren't things holding it in. Now it would be diminishing because it's obviously very limited, right? But okay. And now let's talk in terms of what we really know light is, which is sort of fascinating, right? What is, well, this light that you and I are experiencing actually happens to be a bunch of red, blue, and yellow things, right? There's red photons and yellow photons and blue photons. Is that true? That's what this stuff really is? Yeah? When you look at it here, do you experience any of that color? No. Is it there? Well, you know that color's there, right? How do you know that color's there? Well, as soon as that color, now this is not, when you're talking about godly light, you talk about godly light, and we use this word, being absorbed into a vessel, giving it vitality. Here we're talking about reflecting off. What's happening? What's the explanation of that experience?
It's actually the color temperature of the light. Is it not?
Okay,
Very
to say,
scientific.
but simple shot. We're all simple people.
Everything.
Blue photons are smashing into that at 186,000 miles per second. I am so strong that I can withstand that with my hand alone. Right? 186,000 miles per second, blue photons are smashing into that. What's the explanation of that experience? The blue ones are reflecting back to your eye, also at 186,000 miles per second. Be careful. Right? And all of the others, what's happening to them in that space? They are being absorbed by that space. Okay, so this Kli reveals a certain aspect of the, for all intents and purposes, infinite light. But the Kli allows the light to express itself in a finite way. True? That's exactly what happens. Well, that's why we use the mashal of light, and that's why God created light the way He created light, so that you and I can hold up a book and understand things about godliness that are very, very deep and very, very sophisticated in the most simple and straightforward way. And we don't have to forget them, right? If after class we sit for 5 minutes and write them down, so then we remember them. If we don't, so we don't. Okay, so next time it's also exciting, like fish, they go around the table. Oh, wow, a submarine, cool. And then they come back 2 minutes later. Oh, wow, a submarine, cool. Okay, so people can be like fish, right? So yellow photons are blasting off this and reflecting off this and going into your eye, and you're experiencing yellow. Let's call this red, and the red ones are doing that over here. All right, this is it's reflecting the yellow and the blue and absorbing the red. Right? Isn't that true? That's how it works. I mean, that's what a physicist would tell you, and that's basically what's happening, right? It's not. I mean, there's obviously it can be explained in much more sophisticated terms, but that's basically what's happening. That really is what's happening. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so what did the Kli do? It allowed the, for all intents and purposes, infinite light because, and I think you will agree with me. If you don't, that's okay. Please tell me why not. This light out here has, for all intents and purposes, an infinite potential in expression in color. True? It's endless. You want a slightly lighter blue, 1 drop of white, right? A little darker, 1 drop of black. Right? Okay, now what's happening here? Oh, they're all reflecting. What's happening here? They're all being absorbed. Right? So you don't see any color. White and black aren't colors. Right? They're a lack of color. Right? I remember seeing something. You might not be able to say this anymore. I'm not sure. But I saw a piece of it. It was in the hardware store in the neighborhood I live in about 20 years ago. A piece of paper, and it said, "When you're cold, you're blue. When you're scared, you're yellow. When you're sick, you're green. When you're tired, you're white. When you're hot, you're red. Whatever. When I'm hot, I'm black. When I'm sick, I'm black. When I'm scared, I'm black. Whatever, a couple more things. And you have the nerve to call me colored." Right? Okay. Right? Colored. Because that's what they used to say in the old days. Colored people. Right? Colored. They're not be able to say that anymore. People are so sensitive. You're not allowed. Yeah, I mean, you're not allowed to actually say anything that might. Humor is dead. Is basically the okay. So that this is now. Imagine this is reality. Different shades of infinite godly light expressing themselves in all sorts of different ways. So look around the room. What's happening here? Godly light is not bouncing. Physical light is bouncing off every object. Godly light is clothed in all of these objects in different ways, thereby allowing for a slightly different expression. But what's unique to everything that we're seeing? What are they all? How are they all absolutely similar?
Same source.
Okay, I can say that about everything, so that doesn't really answer the question. They're all physical. Down here. Down here, they're all physical. You're right, they're all coming from the same place, no doubt about it. But they're also all physical. So down here, the light clothes itself in the object to such an extent that you're not aware of the light. You're only aware of the object. And we'll talk about that. Okay? But first, let's see how it works in other worlds. But upper worlds, lower worlds. Worlds of greater revelation, worlds of lesser revelation. Right? So when we say Shemayim, second last line, third, a kavanah elem hem gilu b'chinas yamin shu gilu or va'or atzmei hu b'chinas gilu. The light itself is a higher, less diminished light because the kli is a greater kli, and so the vessel can contain within it a more sophisticated light. Right? Whereas as you go lower, the kli is less sophisticated, so the light has to be more and more constricted in order to be clothed in that kli and not burst it and cause its disappearance. Okay.
So then we're all clean, are we?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Everything. The eretz, hakavana elemes tachtenis, the tachtenim, the lower worlds. Heim b'china smo, they're the left. What's the left? Concealment. She'ena or begilui kol kach, the light's not so revealed. V'gama oratz my baba b'chinas helen vesta, and the light itself comes in a state of concealment. In other words, what in simple gashmistic terms, right? That light bulb. So the light bulb up there could be a thousand. I'm doing before lead. I don't know the numbers in lead. I'm doing watts. Okay, 1,000 watt light bulb. Whoa. Okay. That's a very powerful light bulb, right? Okay, so that's giving off a lot of light. Those spotlights they have, next to the car dealerships, for some strange reason they like that spotlights. And they shine this beam. Well, that's a very, very powerful light. Okay. So now in your living room, you have 100 watt light bulb. So you could have a 100 watt light bulb and the chandelier it's in is clear, so the full weight of the 100 watts is shining. Or you could have a 100 watt light bulb and it's in one of those lamps, and around the lamp is a lampshade. So really, even the 100 watts is being diminished to a certain degree. Now you could also have a 25 watt light bulb in there, and that'll be diminished even more. Right? Okay, so the light and the kli are going to affect how much light is revealed. Okay, but in your living room you can have a stronger light bulb and a greater concealment by put something around it that won't let the light through. In reality, it's going to be a higher level of light, less concealment of that light. The kli will be a more sophisticated kli. Now, in order to understand that, the mashal that we said we were going to talk about, but let's just read the next line, 2 lines, and then we'll talk about the mashal. Ki yadua hefresh b'daled elamis, top of page 112. As is known, the difference of the 4 worlds. Dichsiv, a pasuk. Kol hanikra, it's in Yeshayahu, I think Mem Vav, maybe. Dichsiv, Kol hanikra b'shmi v'lichvedi, all that is called in my name and in my glory. Barasiv, I created it. Elam habriya. Yatsartiv, I formed it. Elam hayitzira. Bria is creation. Yitzira is form. Afasitiv, I even made it. Elam hasiya, the world of action. Shehem, they are. This pasuk contains the information that teaches us about Daled Elamis Abiyah. The 4 worlds, Abiyah. So the Aleph is Atzilus, which is going to come up at the end of the line. Base is Bria, the Yud is Yetzira, and the Ayin is Asiyah. 4 worlds. Bezeh, now a line here that has an impossible context in the order is completely impossible in English, but let's read it anyway. We'll translate it. Bezeh ha'or, Eina k'mei shehu b'atzilus k'mei shehu b'bia. The light is not like it is in Atzilus as it is in Bia. Okay, so obviously we would say the light in Atzilus is not at all like that light in Bia. In other words, the Atzilus, which we just saw, the world of emanation, is completely different than the three lower worlds. Bia, Bria, Yitzir, Asiya. Why? Because Atzilus is a world of godliness, and Bria is the beginning of created reality. Eilam Atzilus is creator. To put it in technical terms, Bereishis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. Where did that happen? Malchus of Atzilus gave birth to Eilam Abriya. Okay, you don't understand what I just said? Fine, no problem. You will by the time we finish the first ice. Okay, fine. Okay, different levels of reality. That's what the Rebbe wants to explain to us. So now, Mibsari echza eleika, pasuk in Yirv, that says, "From my flesh I see God." If we understand, it says we're created in the image of God. So theoretically, if we understand something about ourselves, we should be able to learn something about godly reality by understanding something about our reality. So indeed we can. Okay? And now let's talk. There's two different levels of light. We just said. Soivev, that's what we reveal when we do Iskafia. And this type of light, the Rebbe hasn't called it anything yet. This type of light is called Or Mimale. It fills. What does it fill? Kalim. Vessels, okay? Like coffee fills a cup, okay? It fills. Mem lamed aleph. Mim male. Doesn't surround. It penetrates in. Inner light, external light. Okay, now let's just talk about this in terms of you. Can we do this? We're allowed to do. Let's do this. But I can't get down that low. I feel bad. It's very important. Amazing. It's Rabbi Akiva. What was the other? Rabbi Akiva? So Rabbi Akiva. Okay? In you, there are two different types of powers of soul. Kochot makifin, surrounding powers. We'll talk about it. Surrounding powers. And koiches, kochot pnimin. Inner powers. Powers of the soul that are clothed in you. How does that work? Very simple. It's really not so difficult. Right? We've got 7 minutes, so we'll do our best. First, we'll start with Keches Panimim, inner powers of the soul, which are a mashal, a parable, for the godly light that powers the world, that gives the world existence and brings it into existence and maintains its existence. That's different than the soul, because the soul is not the source of your existence. The soul gives you life, not existence. Right? When your soul leaves your body, not you. When someone's soul leaves their body, the body still exists. The soul didn't give it existence, it gave it life. Life, it's now not alive, but it exists. Someone's saying all sorts of stuff. In you, how does it work? You have all sorts of powers of the soul that are clothed in your body and vitalize your body and allow you to do things while you're walking around in a physical body. Right? Some of those are more sophisticated, some of those are less sophisticated, meaning higher or lower powers of the soul. I think we'd all agree that intellect is certainly the most sophisticated power of the soul that we have, and movement is the least sophisticated power of the soul, right? Because monkeys can swing through trees better than us, but they have a hard time understanding a Maimer Chassidus. Okay, fine. That being said, those powers of the soul are clothed in kalim. We call those kalim limbs, right? But they're kalim, vessels. Where's intellect clothed? Your brain. Right? Can your brain think? No, your brain does not think. Your brain reveals the power of thinking, power of intellect that exists in the soul. How do I know that? Why don't I just say my brain thinks? Okay, another example. My eye. Does my eye see? No, my eye does not see. My eye reveals the power of sight that exists in the soul. And when the soul is clothed in my body, the power of sight clothes itself here. It doesn't clothe itself here. It doesn't clothe itself here. It clothes itself specifically here and in the optical nerves back to the optical center of the brain. And that's where sight is happening. And that's a power of the soul that is clothed in those kalim, allowing them to see physical reality. How do I know what I just said is true? That eyes don't see. What? You guys are too young to think about it. Baruch Hashem. Do dead people see? Do they have eyes? Of course they have eyes. Do they have optical nerves? Of course they have optical nerves. What do you think you're putting in the ground? Right? There's no eyes there. They disappear. The person dies. All of a sudden their eyes fall out of their head. That's it. There's empty holes. There's no head either. Of course it's there. They're there. They just don't see. Why? Because eyes don't see. Eyes are a kli, a vessel, to allow for the power of sight that exists in the soul to express itself in the world, in physical reality. So there's a physical vessel that takes that metaphysical power and expresses itself in physicality. Wow, that's cool. Okay, what's really cool about sight, which I just think this is the coolest thing. I just find this amazing. And this is someone who can't see past his nose. Where's sight really happening? It's in there, right? The screen is in there. Where do I experience it? Out there. I don't get that. How can I experience it out there if the screen is in here? The screen's in there. A horse has two screens, right? Because he has an eye here and an eye here, right? So he has two screens. Most animals preyed upon have two screens so they can see there, because that's where the guy who wants to eat them might be. God's pretty cool, right? Whereas the predators tend to see that way, right? Okay, fine. Pretty cool, right? I don't know how you see with two screens. I'm having a hard enough time with one. I've got these glasses. They sort of work. I don't know. Fine. Okay, so all these powers of the soul are clothed in your body and express themselves in different ways. Sight clothes itself here, and again, there's optical nerves that are connected to the brain that grew out as you were in utero. Your eye started to form, right? You've seen those pictures of those little guys. They have these little bulges here. The eyes are forming relatively early. And then these little alfalfa sprouts grow out from the eye, and figure out how this happens. I have no clue, but God's cool, right? They grow, they find the place in the brain that is the optical center of the brain, and they go, and that's happening, I don't know how many, millions of times. There is stuff in there that's all connecting to where it's supposed to be connected to. Okay, that's why you say a lot of Tehillim when your wife comes home and says, I have good news. And then you've got about 7.5 or 7 months to say a lot of Tehillim, that it should all work out the way it's supposed to work out, because it's pashut miraculous, as natural as it is, right? Okay, so where's hearing clothed? Where's speech clothed? Where's intellect clothed? Where's movement clothed? Into this kli, very sophisticated, right? I mean, it really is. It's a very sophisticated thing. But relative to this thing, it's this thing we understand very, very well, right? You can go to an orthopedist and, he'll open it up and figure and clean it up and put it back together, and it'll start moving again. You have a problem up there, neurologist can't cure anything, right? No, that makes sense, right? I mean, it's a rather different kli, right? Pretty hard, right? Okay, they're working on it. Not that they're not trying, and they're amazing people, but my wife, as a doctor, always wondered, like, why would anybody go into neurology? No one ever gets better, right? Which is really, you can sort of give them a better life but can't cure it. Okay, this is broken? Well, go in there. They like, this is a little small, but your leg is like broken in two. Okay, they'll open you up and they'll put in a rod, and then 2 years later you won't even remember it happened, except you'll beep when you go through the airport. Right? Okay, fine. More sophisticated, less sophisticated, rather protected. This kli, pretty well protected. Stings for 10, 15 seconds, goes away. Anything happen? Nothing. Ever heard of a boxer who has a problem with his hands after 10 years in the ring? No. Ever heard of a boxer who has a problem with his head after 10 years in the ring? Well, most of them can't think straight. They just drool, right? Because they're smashed to bits up there. Right? Okay. This is pretty sophisticated. The or is an incredibly sophisticated or, it's called intellect, and the kli is an incredibly sophisticated kli, it's called the brain. Now we know it's also the center of everything else, beseder, we're talking about specifically intellect. Okay, fine. So 2 worlds, higher worlds, lower worlds, more sophisticated light, more sophisticated keli, less sophisticated light, less sophisticated clay. That doesn't mean they're not sophisticated. Reality is very sophisticated. The fact that God brought this world into existence is absolutely astounding. Okay, beseder, but relative to upper worlds, they're more sophisticated in terms of the godliness revealed. At least until we bring Mashiach, then we'll see. We'll see what's really going to happen down here and why it's dafka down here that God wants. Okay, so that's higher and lower. Keches, now, until now, what did we talk about? Keches panimim, inner light, inner powers of the soul that are clothed in your body. If the power of sight were to clothe itself here, you couldn't hear or see. Right? It's not amorphous, it's a particular power. Right? Okay. If the power of movement were to clothe itself here, so you wouldn't smell very well, but you'd be able to move your nose a lot. There's those people who can move their ears. Okay, wow. In high school, the guy who could move his ears, like, oh, wow, hey, look at Jimmy, he can move his ears, so cool. Okay, fine. Different levels, different worlds, no problem. What's Keches Makifin, which is obviously going to be a moshel for Or Sevev, right? This, we just talked about a moshel for Or Mamale, the godly light that fills the different worlds, higher level, lower level. So Atzilus would correspond to intellect, and this world would correspond to movement. Now, movement can be very, very sophisticated, right? I mean, a person, because they have intellect, a person can teach their hands how to play a Bach concerto on a piano. Well, it's pretty sophisticated movement, right? And those of us who don't know how to do that are always jealous of those people who, put in the time to learn how to do it. It's called muscle memory. So that's also important, and I'm sorry for it's late, I know, but it is important to know. Muscle memory, in Chassidus, what does muscle memory mean? Seichel of movement. There's seichel, all different levels of reality, all contain within them all levels of reality, right? All the 10 spheres are contained within each other. Spheres Eimer, you talk about the 7 spheres, each containing all 7. So there's seichel shebe, the intellect of even your finger. Now, it's not the intellect that can appreciate a deep idea, but you and I call it muscle memory. So you can teach this thing to know without thinking which chord to play on a guitar, right? Where to put, this one's doing that, right? This part's not so easy either if you're serious, right? But if you're just going like this, so this part's not so hard, but this part's pretty hard, right? You have to move them around. Well, people who know how to do it don't think about it, right? It just does. The person playing the concerto doesn't think about it. He just plays it because his fingers know how to do it. If you've ever sprained your ankle, anybody here ever sprained your ankle? You have to do physiotherapy. What do you have to learn how to do again? Balance. I said, what do you mean balance? Come on. I remember the first time I went in, the guy said, okay, we're going to teach you how to balance again. I said, hello, I'm 45 years old. I think I probably know how to balance. He said, okay, stand up on your left foot and let's see how you do. And I fell right over. He said, first, hold on. Make sure there's something next you can fall on. Right? He said, it was injured and it forgot how to balance. So what do? You do exercises to teach it how to balance. Muscle memory is what it's called in English. What's it called in Chassidus? Seichel shebe, intellect in. Okay, but it's a different intellect, obviously. But all the different levels exist in all the different levels. True. But this is basically movement. Okay, what's an example in you of keiches makifin, which will correspond to infinite godly light or sevev, which is what you reveal when you do iskafia? What's an example of that in you? Something that's part of you but isn't clothed in any particular kli. Don't say intellect, it's up there.
Words.
Huh?
Words. The power of the speech.
That's here. I think of the words up here, that's called thought, and I express that to you. I reveal what's going on here through something called speech, so now you know what's going on in here.
Emotions.
The neshama, I don't know what that means. That's two, this is all the neshama, because the neshama has powers of intellect, powers of emotion. Malchus of the neshama is what allows you to do this. Will, ratzon. Right? Where is Ratzon housed? It's not housed anywhere. Where is it expressed? Everywhere equally. Why am I moving my hand? Why am I moving my hand? Simple shot. Why am I moving? Nothing deep. Because I want to. Thank you. Because I want to. Why do I want to? Because I'm a raving lunatic. Okay, beside it. I want to. No, I want to express the idea that the reason I'm moving my hand is because I want to. Why am I speaking? Because I want to. Why am I thinking about a particular thought? Because I want to. You don't want to? Stop thinking about it. Right? You become aware of it and realize, I don't want to think about that. Okay, so stop. I'll stop. It might be hard. Start singing a niggin. I don't know, push another thought in there or something. That's why it's always good to memorize a few Mishnayos and memorize a few lines of Tanya and more than a few, but right? Memorize things, and then if you have some weird thought popping into your head, you can start saying, quoting Shakespeare. Better to quote a Mishnah, right? Okay. Yeah? Ratzon. Ratzon is a kayach makif. It surrounds you. It's not clothed in you. Because if it were clothed in you, it would express itself in one part of you and not in another part of you. You don't see with your hands. You can do something similar to seeing if chas v'shalom you were robbed of the power of sight, not you, but one, right? So then that person could teach themselves how to walk down the street using a cane, but they're not seeing, they are feeling their way down the street. They're not seeing their way down the street. That's not what they're doing. Right? Because you can't see with your hand. You can bring about something similar to what would happen through seeing, and I think most of us find it quite astounding that they are able to learn that and get around as well as they do, but the Eibishter should be kind to them and give them their power of sight immediately by bringing Mashiach, right? So fine, but that's not called seeing. But it is Ratzon. It's all Ratzon. Every conscious act you do is Ratzon. The only reason you're doing it is because you want to. Can't do anything you don't want. Right? We all heard from our parents, right? You have to learn how to do things you don't want, son. Pick up the son. My father never said that. You have to learn how, but he did say that. You have to learn how to do things you don't want. It's not true. You can't do anything you don't want. No such thing. What do you have to learn? Proper priority. I want to stay in bed. Everybody wants to stay in bed when the alarm rings. Right? Okay. I want to stay in bed. I want to keep my job. Which of those two desires takes precedence? Depends how mature I am. If I'm not particularly mature, I will roll over, stay in bed, and lose my job. Right? If I am a mature person, I will say my desire to keep my job is more powerful than my desire to stay in bed. So I'll get up. That's what mature people do. Right? Other people lose a few jobs. Then what? All of a sudden they become mature people, having lost a few jobs. Giving terutzim to the boss, every day, and another terutzim, and at a certain point, what does the boss say? Just find another job. I can't, I'm just not interested in this every day hearing, what happened to you this morning, right? Okay. So you can't get out of bed unless you want to. It's impossible. No, I don't want to get out of bed, but I do anyway. No, everything you do is an expression of your ratzon. When you mean you don't want to get out of bed, you mean I really didn't want to get out of bed, but I realized that I have to because, and you'll explain the reason why you prioritized getting out of bed as opposed to staying in bed. All right? Fine. That's the way we work. So everything's an expression of, every conscious activity is an expression of ratzon. The only thing you and I do that's not ratzon is a reflex, and that's very rare. If there's fire, you'll move your hand away. If the doctor hits your kneecap, your leg will go flying. But I mean, that's very rare, right? Everything you do is a... Now, there might be, we're not going to get into this, but I mean, there might be, so to speak, psychological reflexes that every time your mother says that to you, you immediately react. You go, no, wait. Now, what do you have to do? First you want not to do that, and then work on it and change it. Okay, but you might call that a reflex, but it's really still, you made the conscious decision to do it because you could make the conscious decision not to, right? Okay, and there's one other level, it's very late and we'll stop here. There's another level called tanug, pleasure. Also, where's pleasure clothed in the body? You can get pleasure from your feet. You can get pleasure from your brain understanding something. You can get pleasure from your palate eating something. You can get pleasure in your emotions from seeing someone. Right? Pleasure is everywhere. Right? It might be one of the greatest pleasures in life. If you're a hiker, any hikers here? Right? Okay. You hike, I don't know whether there's any cold streams in Arizona, but if you hike in the mountains and your feet are really sore and you take a break and you take off your hiking boots and you take off your socks and you put them in that cold creek, wow, there are very few pleasures greater than that. Wow, does that feel good? Your whole body goes, oh, wow. Okay, pleasure, right? Waking up, hearing the rain, looking at your clock, it's 45 minutes till the alarm, you roll over, those 4 seconds before you fall back to sleep are about as good as it gets in Olam Hazeh, right? You pull the covers up and you go, but you're gone, you're pretty fast, you're not conscious anymore, okay? But those 4 seconds, wow, that was good, okay? Pleasure. A makif. Not clothed anywhere, expressed everywhere. Okay, when you do just one last idea and then you'll understand it, then we're going to stop, and I apologize for going so late. Right? But it's not Kriya Satar today, so okay. So we just said, when you subdue the Sitra Achra, you reveal or Soivev. So now, in the Eibishter, what would you call Soivev? What do we call it in you? What powers of the soul?
Pleasure.
And Ratzon, will. Not so much, not desire, will. Yes, desire, but will. Right? Okay. So when you subdue the Sitra Achra, what level of godly reality are you connecting to and revealing? God's will. Why aren't you doing this? Because God doesn't want me to. Why are you doing this? Because God does. I like it. I don't like it. I'm doing this because God likes it. God wants it. Okay. So when I overcome that desire not to do it, I'm revealing His will. Now, whatever it is that I don't want to do, for whatever reason I've done. But I can overcome that and say, or the other way around, whatever it is that I do want to do that I realize is not a healthy thing to do, so I don't do it. Okay. So what have I connected to at that moment? In very simply, God's will. Save it. Okay.
Can you help me?
Hmm?
Can you help me?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you help me? I'm trying to